It proposes the use of frightening allegories, stories and symbols that do the work of 1,000 soldiers. It gives an example, a tale spread by traveling friars about a man whose belt, a gift from his wife, was enchanted by a jealous demon. The belt could not be removed, and every night it tightened, a symbolic punishment for his wandering eye. The story wasn't about a real belt. It was a piece of code, a virus planted in the collective mind to enforce marital fidelity and social purity far more effectively than any law. It feels heavy, not just with vellum and leather, but with the weight of a forbidden mind. As you run your thumb along the binding, you feel it, a subtle thickness, a slight bulge that doesn't belong. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic drum in the silent night. With a stolen knife, you carefully, painstakingly slice the threads, and there, you hear it. The faint, dry whisper of ancient glue and stiffened leather giving way, a sound that has been waiting centuries to be made. A folded piece of vellum, brittle as a dead leaf, slides into your palm. A single drop of hot wax falls from your candle onto the page, sizzling for a moment before hardening into a translucent tear. It covers the word custodia, guard. The guard was never meant to be on the outside. But that leaves one gnawing question. A question that makes the hair on your arms stand up. If this manuscript is the real secret, the software, then what is that rusted metal contraption locked away with the holy relics in the abbot's chapel? The one he calls the heretic's folly. It looks just like the crude, physical cages people think existed. Almost no one has ever seen one. It's a ghost story, a piece of sophisticated propaganda. The idea of the belt is the true prison, designed to make your own natural instincts feel alien, a sickness that needs a cure. It's the same tactic of manufactured shame you see in any purity culture, ancient or modern. They create an impossible standard of sinlessness, then sell you the cure for a disease they invented. The metallic taste of fear and guilt is the intended flavor of every confession, every sermon. They want you to believe you are born broken. Why is their mark on a device of supposed Catholic piety hidden in the very foundations of a bastion of that faith? The official story is a neat and tidy lie, the kind institutions have perfected over millennia. It's the historical equivalent of finding a crashed UFO and calling it a weather balloon. A confiscated item from a heretical sect, a trophy, a warning, but as you imagine holding the cold, heavy iron, you feel the lie in its very molecular structure. It feels wrong, out of place, but as your consciousness dissolves, a final terrifying question forms. Who taught her these secrets? Where did this knowledge, this power to defy God's own judgment come from? The priest's shadow is already lengthening in the doorway. He has heard whispers of miracles that don't involve a single prayer, and he knows a woman who can erase God's punishment must be silenced. The text describes how to use this knowledge to amplify guilt, to transform personal failings into a debt owed to God, a debt only the church could broker. You feel a cold knot forming in your stomach. It describes creating learned helplessness, convincing a people that they are so inherently broken, so stained with sin, that they are incapable of thinking for themselves. Third, and most chilling, is the principle of symbolic restraint. The manual argues that physical chains are expensive and breed rebellion. The most effective prison is one the prisoner builds himself. The secret that cost thousands their lives wasn't buried in a Templar vault or a heretic's crypt. For 900 years, it was hiding in plain sight, stitched into the spine of a book owned by a man who dared to love and to think. You are in a cold stone room in Paris, long after the curfew bell has rung. The only sound is the sputtering of a tallow candle, casting your shadow, huge and monstrous, against the wall. The book is in your hands, The Sick et Non of Peter Abelard. The medievals weren't building a physical lock for the body. They were writing the source code for controlling the will. This manuscript in your hands is the genesis of it all. It's like finding Leonardo's notebook and realizing his designs for a helicopter were actually the blueprints for a weapon that could erase memory. The stomach-churning revelation is that the medieval weapon of control was far more advanced, far more insidious than we ever dared to imagine. The secret wasn't a crude object. It was the blueprint for thought itself. 99% of people believe the Middle Ages were a passionless, pious void. They have no idea that these erotic, hilarious poems were the blockbuster entertainment of the era, enjoyed by nobles in their drafty castles and by you, a peasant in a smoky tavern. It's a shared secret, a current of illicit joy running right under the church's nose. They want you to feel shame. It's a weapon, more effective than any sword. They whisper tales of monstrous devices, of iron chastity belts with cruel locks, designed to cage a woman's body. The truth? The lock mechanism is simple, a pin and keyhole, but on its tarnished surface, almost erased by time, is a faint etching. It's a serpent, coiled around a key, a symbol not of God, not of Christ, not of the Virgin. It is a known sigil of the Ophites, a Gnostic sect the Church declared utterly demonic, a cult that believed the serpent in Eden was a hero, a bringer of true knowledge, and the God of the Old Testament was a cosmic jailer. It's the same cold dread we feel today when we wonder if the cure is being hidden for the sake of profit, a modern echo of a medieval conspiracy. As the anesthetic takes hold, the candlelight above you begins to swim. The woman's face becomes a soft-edged moon. Her voice is the last thing you hear, a low murmur cutting through the fog. Do not be afraid. The body knows how to mend. We only have to listen. You are surrendering your pain to a heretic. The goal, it states, is to induce a state of constant, low-grade anxiety, making the population psychologically dependent on the church for the only relief. Second, the systematization of guilt. Confession, 99% of people believe, was for spiritual cleansing. The manual reveals its true purpose. It was the most effective mass surveillance program in human history. It wasn't about absolution. It was about information. It was about cataloging the secret shames and vulnerabilities of every man, woman, and child. You extinguish the tallow lamp with your fingers, plunging the room into darkness, save for the dying orange glow of the hearth. Your heart hammers a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. You shove the book into the hollowed-out space beneath the loose hearthstone, your fingers scraping against the rough, cold stone. The knock on your door isn't the gentle tap of a neighbor seeking aid. It is the hard, authoritative rap of a fist on oak. You know the sound of a hunting party when you hear one. And tonight, they are not hunting deer. And you realize with a cold dread that feels like swallowing ice, this is a technology that never went away. It just changed its name. Think of the algorithms that feed you an endless scroll of outrage, conditioning your emotional responses. Think of the shame-based advertising that makes you hate your own body to sell you a cure. The architects of our modern digital cages didn't invent this. They just rediscovered a dark art, perfected in a cold monastery 1,000 years ago. Later that night, in a tavern crowded with bodies seeking warmth from the hearth, a traveling scholar unrolls a scroll. He's a performer, and his stage is the rickety table he stands on. He begins to read, and it isn't a prayer. It's a fablio, a story so bawdy it makes the serving girl choke on her ale. It's a tale of a cheating wife, a foolish priest, and a clever lover that ends not with a moral, but with a punchline that sends the entire room into a roar of laughter. An early, vicious prototype of what later centuries would call a chastity belt. The official report, when it's finally released decades later in 2019, will date it to the 11th century. Shockingly early, centuries before historians thought such devices existed. But that's the public story. That's the sliver of truth they give you to make you look away from the real secret. 99% of people who hear this story will never know about the detail that changes everything. You lean closer, but this woman, with her quiet knowledge and steady hands, offered a key to the cell door. She was practicing a form of medicine that worked. It was tangible, it was effective, and it was earthly. And that threatened the entire celestial narrative. They had to brand her knowledge as evil, create a chastity belt for the mind, convincing you to fear the very remedies that could save you. It's a phantom pain you can almost feel now, an echo across centuries, the agony of knowing that relief was real, but you were taught to call it damnation. They want you to believe you are free because you can choose between 100 empty slogans. But the cage is still there. Its bars are woven from your data. Its lock is forged from your fear. They buried the medieval secret of the mind cage because it is the exact same blueprint they use on you right now. They lied to you about the past. What else are they lying about now? It feels like reading a redacted CIA field manual on destabilizing a foreign government. Only the target nation is the human mind itself. The manual outlines a three-part strategy. First, the weaponization of fear. Not just the abstract fear of hell, but the tangible, daily fear of damnation for a single misspoken word, a fleeting, impure thought. It instructs priests to use the pulpit to create a theater of eternal consequence, where every shadow holds a demon and every misfortune is a sign of divine wrath. They fought back with a network of knowledge so powerful it had to be rebranded as witchcraft. You are the living memory they tried to destroy. The ASMR quality sound of you carefully turning a fragile, brittle page is a gunshot in the oppressive silence of the night. Each rustle, each crackle of the vellum is an act of defiance. A sudden, sharp crack from outside snaps you back to the present. Not the wind, the sound of a heavy branch breaking under a boot. A specific prayer, repeated thousands of times, designed not for piety, but to exhaust the cognitive resources of the mind until it is too weak to form a sinful thought. It's a denial of service attack on the human spirit. Another diagram shows how to link a natural human desire to a memory of profound, soul-crushing shame. To engineer a reflex so deep that the first stirrings of lust trigger an immediate, gut-wrenching wave of self-hatred. This is not faith. This is programming. This is the infamous culture of the bathhouse, the social hub of your world, and it is more real, more human than any sermon you have ever heard. You sink into the scalding water, the rough-hewn wood of the tub scraping against your back. You can still hear the priest's voice from Sunday, a thin, reedy instrument of shame, promising damnation for the sins of the flesh. But here, in the steam, the flesh is just flesh. Warm, alive, and utterly normal. You and the others pry it open, revealing a small sealed cavity, a void in the foundation that has breathed nothing but its own darkness for centuries. Inside, there is a lead-lined box. It's heavy, impossibly so. Not the weight of gold or silver, but the dense, dead weight of a secret. When the lid is finally forced, the object inside steals the air from the room. It's not a chalice, not a saint's bone. It's an iron girdle, a crudely forged cage of interlocking rings and plates, brutal and artless. And in the soil around her, the chemical traces of this exact anesthetic cocktail. She wasn't a witch, she was a surgeon. She wasn't a heretic, she was a healer. And that made her more dangerous to the church than any demon. Why? Because a populace that can heal itself is a populace that doesn't need to buy salvation. The church built an empire on the idea that your body was a prison of sin and suffering was your sentence. Every prayer, every tithe, every purchased indulgence was a plea for parole. The institution is no longer just a stone church. It's the algorithm in your pocket. The pulpit is no longer made of wood. It's the glowing screen in your hand. The chastity belt for the mind is the curated reality fed to you every second. A stream of manufactured outrage and carefully chosen anxieties designed to keep you distracted, divided, and afraid. It sells you salvation in the form of a new product and offers you absolution if you just conform. The heretics of today aren't burned. They are deplatformed, shamed, and buried by the endless scroll. Instructions for subjugating minds. You turn a page, and the vellum crackles with a sound like dry bones. The script is a precise, elegant Latin, but the words are not about God. They are about power. This isn't a religious text. It's a manual, a step-by-step blueprint for the engineering of the human soul. What they don't want you to know is that the entire system of medieval belief, the one you were taught was born of simple faith and fear of the unknown, was a deliberate, calculated, psychological operation. This document is the proof. The deliberate erasure of female experts from the narrative. The dismissal of knowledge that comes from experience rather than scripture. It's a tactic that echoes through the centuries, finding its way into modern science, business, and politics, where a woman's insight is questioned while a man's is taken as fact. You feel a surge of defiant energy, a hot, bright connection to the silent, resilient rebellion of every woman who ever held this book. They fought back not with swords, but with secrets whispered over a birthing bed. Historians love to confidently state the chastity belt was a 19th century invention, a Victorian device to stop masturbation. They use this fact to dismiss the entire medieval myth, but they've missed the terrifying point completely. The medievals didn't need to forge the metal. They had perfected the software. These diagrams aren't for a physical cage. They are a step-by-step guide to building a prison inside someone's own soul. A psychological fortress of such ingenious cruelty that it makes a metal belt seem like a child's toy. Look here. This section details a circulum cogitatianosus, a thought loop. It's a world of steam and skin, of echoing laughter and the constant gentle slosh of water. Men and women, separated only by a flimsy wooden partition, or in some towns, not separated at all, gossip and argue and flirt. A merchant haggles over the price of wool with a weaver, their bare shoulders nearly touching. A young woman giggles as a man tells her a story, his voice a low rumble beneath the din. The church called it a confiscated item, but the symbol etched into its lock tells a story they tried to bury for 1,000 years. It begins not in the distant past, but in the 1980s, with the rhythmic thud of a sledgehammer against stone. You are a worker, dust coating your tongue, renovating a cellar in the ancient abbey of St. Gallen in Switzerland. The air is thick with the ghosts of stale incense and damp earth. Then, a hollow sound. A section of wall that isn't solid. But as she dips a cloth into the mixture and brings it to your lips, the scent isn't hellfire. It's the promise of sleep. A deep, dreamless void where the pain can't follow. The priest offers you heaven tomorrow. This woman offers you oblivion right now. This is the secret that was buried in the earth for over 800 years, until archaeologists in Italy unearthed a woman just like her, laid to rest not with a cross, but with a full surgical kit, scalpels, saws, and forceps so sophisticated they defied everything we thought we knew. It was proof that humanity was not born into debt, a fallen thing in need of a lord and a priest to grant it worth. And that truth was so terrifying to the men in power that they buried it under cathedrals and burned it at the stake. Because a people who believe in their own inherent power have no need for gatekeepers. They had to make you fear the universe inside your own head. And here is the secret they are still hiding. The cage never went away. The architecture just changed. The air in the archive is so old, it has a taste. It's dry, like paper dust and forgotten prayers. The only sound is the soft hum of a climate control system and your own breathing, unnaturally loud. You are one of only a handful of scholars granted access since the seal was broken in 2003. And the document in your gloved hands doesn't belong here. It feels cold, clinical, utterly alien amongst the sacred hymnals and papal bulls. There is no gold leaf, no reverent illustration. The title is stamped in plain, severe lettering, Instructio ad subjugandum mentes. You think of Elspeth, the woman who gave you this book on her deathbed, her knuckles white as she pressed it into your hands. Her fingernails had been torn out by the village priest, who accused her of cursing the baron's livestock. The truth? She had saved the baron's daughter from a postpartum hemorrhage, using a technique from this very book, a secret the male physicians dismissed as women's nonsense. They didn't just burn the women, they tried to burn their libraries, their knowledge, their entire legacy. This feels familiar, doesn't it? The whispers, the rumors of what the old masters knew, it was too much to bear. Your eyes trace the diagram on the page. It looks, at first glance, like the schematics for a lock. An intricate, cruel-looking device of bands and hinges. But the notations are all wrong. There are no measurements in cubits or inches. The labels aren't iron or rivet. They are timor Dei, fear of God. Verecundia, public shame. Oratio perpetua, ceaseless prayer. This isn't a blueprint for a blacksmith. It is an architecture for the mind. And that's the secret 99% of people will never understand. What they don't want you to know is that the church kept two sets of books. One told you how to be saved. The other, hidden from view, was a secret ledger of how you sinned. in breathtaking, exhaustive detail. You push aside the heavy wool flap, and the heat hits you like a physical blow. Steam, thick with the smell of wet wood, hot stones, and the sharp tang of sweat, billows out into the cold street. Inside the public bathhouse, the air is alive. It's an elegant, brutal system, and understanding this economic engine of psychological control makes perfect, cynical sense. But it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the shocking discovery made in the ruins of a French monastery, deep beneath the flagstones of the scriptorium. It doesn't explain the bones, and it certainly doesn't explain why they were buried with pages from a book that was never supposed to exist. This is the moment 99% of people in your world will never experience: a choice. You can accept God's agonizing will, or you can accept the help of a woman the church calls a witch. You watch her grind the poppy heads with a stone pestle. The sound is a soft, rhythmic shush thump, an ASMR quality lullaby against the screaming in your bone. She adds crushed henbane seeds and the gnarled root of a mandrake, a plant said to shriek like a dying man when pulled from the earth. You've heard the stories. You know these are the devil's herbs. That your thoughts were sinful, your desires were traps, and your freedom was a doorway to damnation. They didn't need to chain your body, because they had convinced you to chain your own soul. This is the war the serpent and key society was truly fighting. They weren't smashing iron, they were shattering an idea. The forbidden manuscripts detailing the orbits of stars, the hidden cures from women they called witches, the forgotten philosophies that celebrated the human mind. It was all ammunition. And you realize, with a tremor that is not entirely from the cold, that some heretics don't fight the system with fire and swords. Some have learned how to hack it, and they think you are one of them. She is a threat. You trace a small, faded symbol inked into the margin of a page describing how to turn a breached baby in the womb. A serpent coiled around a key. This is your mark, the sign of the secret society they will never name, the one you belong to, the serpent and key. You are not just a midwife. You are a soldier on the front lines of a hidden war, and your weapon is this forbidden wisdom. The most infamous object of the Middle Ages never existed, but the weapon it represented, the real weapon, was far, far worse. You are Brother Thomas, and the air in the scriptorium is so cold you can see your breath, a ghostly plume in the candlelight. The silence is a living thing, broken only by the dry rasp of the vellum page turning under your trembling fingers. This is forbidden. The abbot keeps this manuscript, De Anima Custodia, the guarding of the soul, locked away for a reason, but you had to know. They had to have a way to recognize each other, a method of identification that was simple, portable, and utterly invisible to the uninitiated. The secret handshake would be too public, a coded phrase too easily overheard. They needed something else. The truth of their existence and the key to their entire network wasn't hidden in a grand cathedral or a secret vault. It was hidden on a simple piece of worn leather. But what does a map of the heavens have to do with a belt? Today, that feeling of manufactured guilt is the engine of a different economy. You feel it when an app creates an anxiety you didn't know you had, then sells you the premium subscription to solve it. You feel it when the algorithm learns your secret desires and then floods your screen with the one thing you're trying to resist. They have built a digital confessional in your pocket, and they are taxing your thoughts, one click at a time. You feel the crushing weight of a debt, not of gold, but of data and distraction. He prayed, anointed you with holy water that felt colder than the grave, and told you to prepare your soul. Suffering, he said, purifies you for God. But you don't want purity. You want to live. Now, a woman leans over you. Her name is a whisper in the village, spoken with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Her hands don't tremble. They are steady, sure, and smell of damp earth, mint, and something else. Something sweet and forbidden. She holds a small ceramic bowl. Inside is a dark, thick paste. The greatest lie ever told was not about God or kings. It was about you. You were told the chastity belt was the ultimate tool of control, a cruel invention of iron and lock. But 99% of people miss the real secret. The most dangerous cage ever built was invisible. It had no bars, no hinges, no keyhole. It was a story, whispered from the pulpit until it settled in your bones. A lie so profound, it became the air you breathed. The lie was simple, that you were born broken. The paranoia is a physical thing, a rat gnawing in your gut. As you push open your damp wooden door, your foot hits something small on the threshold. You bend down. It's a carving, a small wooden bird, its wings half unfurled as if about to take flight. It's the one the traveler was carving. It's a symbol you have never seen before, not in any church, not on any coat of arms. It feels like a key, but not for a lock you can see. It feels like a question. It details everything from the stages of childbirth to the use of herbs for pain, from remedies for infertility to recipes for cosmetics that grant a woman agency over her own appearance. For centuries, the church has tried to erase it. First, they claimed it was written by a man. When that lie failed, they tried to ban it. Why? Because a woman who understands her own body cannot be easily controlled by narratives of shame. A woman who can ease her sister's labor pain is a source of power outside the stone walls of their cathedrals. He looks at you, a low scrape of stone on stone in his voice, and he says a single word, a name you have never heard before. Gardener. He says it not as a question, but as a statement of fact. And in his eyes, you see a terrifying, ancient recognition. You realize with a surge of cold dread that the war you are fighting is not new, and the mind keepers you rose against are far older and more powerful than you could ever have imagined. This was the knowledge they preserved, the truth they passed between themselves in whispers, hiding it in plain sight, encoded in architecture and buried in books. They were a network of minds, keeping the light alive in an age of manufactured darkness. They knew the earth was not the center of everything. They knew the universe was older, vaster, and more mysterious than the church would ever admit. This knowledge was their sacred trust, a secret so dangerous that its discovery would mean the end of their order and their lives. It's the almost silent scrape of the fingernail on a worn silver penny as you pull it from your pouch, the only real thing you own. It's the hollow, lonely clink as it drops into the alms box, a sound that promises salvation but buys only a moment's peace. This is a tax on human nature itself. And here is the secret that survived for centuries, hidden in parish records, sealed for over 700 years. This system was never about piety. It was about revenue, and it never went away. What they don't want you to know is that your pain is a commodity. It can be bought, sold, and used to control you. In the year 1287, this isn't a metaphor. It's the air you breathe. You're lying on a rough-hewn table, the splintered wood digging into your back. The world is a blur of sweat and terror. Your leg is a landscape of ruin, shattered by a cartwheel, and now turning a venomous shade of purple-black. A village priest has already been, and they are getting closer. A bird. While everyone else stares at Agneta with fear or piety, he watches the crowd. He watches the watchers. He is mapping the network. For a fleeting second, his eyes meet yours. There's no judgment in them, only calculation. Later, as the sun bleeds out behind the skeletal trees, you hurry back to your small, cold home. The fear from the market clings to you, a second skin. You remember a joke you made at the alehouse, a complaint about the price of salt. Who heard? Who will tell? You run a thumb over the worn leather, feeling the ghost of every woman who hellbis before you. This is your inheritance. Not land, not coin, but this, a rebellion bound in calfskin. What they don't want you to know is that the war against witches was never about demons or pacts with the devil. It was a war against women like you. It was a war on knowledge. 99% of people, even today, have never heard of the Trotula, the book you are now hiding, a revolutionary 12th century medical text, written by a woman for women. He pulls it from your tunic and looks at it, not with superstitious dread, but with a flicker of confusion, before passing it to his captain. The captain is a different kind of man. His eyes are not cruel, but they are unnervingly intelligent. He takes the medallion and turns it over and over, his thumb tracing the shape of the key. He doesn't ask what it is. He doesn't call it an instrument of the devil. They wanted a populace that looked to the pulpit. And so they created a dark age by deliberately, systematically extinguishing the lights. The faint smell of ash and burning parchment that hangs over the centuries isn't the smell of piety. It's the smell of a crime scene. This recovered star chart from Fulda is more than just lost science. It is the first piece of undeniable physical proof that the secret society we've been tracking, the brotherhood known as the Serpent and Key, was real. This wasn't the work of one brilliant, isolated monk. This was their doctrine. It is the most brilliant economic tool ever conceived, a mental chastity belt locked onto the very core of your humanity. The fear it creates, that imaginary lock on your most private self, drives a river of silver into the coffers of the church. You can hear it now in the silence between your prayers, the soft, insistent whisper of a coin being rubbed between a priest's thumb and forefinger, waiting. What history books forget to mention is the sound of that economy. Was it just your invention, a desperate prayer for intellectual freedom, or are you part of something more? You close the heavy book, the leather cover groaning like a coffin lid. As you press it shut, a terrifying, thrilling thought takes root. What if in a convent in France, another sister is tracing this same serpent? What if in a monastery in England, a monk is hiding the very same key in the margins of his own book? What if this isn't just a symbol of defiance, but the secret handshake of a network hidden in plain sight? It's a joke they didn't find funny. It's the society's counter-propaganda, confiscated and locked away in the dark. And with that realization, a new, far more terrifying thought begins to form. If they captured the society's propaganda, it means they are aware of the war. It means they are fighting back. And now, all the pieces are in place for the final, horrifying revelation. The coded messages, the strange rituals in the crypt, the belt in the basement. It all points to a single, unthinkable truth. The monks aren't just hiding a secret, they are hunting one. They will call it cancel culture. They will think it is new. They will never learn that the operating system was perfected right here, in the mud, with sackcloth and ash. The prison was never physical. The prison was always social. You watch as Agneta is forced to her knees before the church steps, her head bowed. The priest drones on, his voice a weapon. Your gaze drifts past him, to a man leaning against the wall of the apothecary. He's a traveler, not from your town. He's carving a piece of wood with a small, sharp knife. The book in your hands feels heavier than stone, heavier than sin. It has no author listed on its cover, because to name the woman who wrote it is to invite the flame. You are in a small wattle and daub hut, the kind of place history forgets. The air is thick with the smell of dried yarrow, feverfew, and the metallic tang of your own fear. Outside, the wind howls a lonely hymn through the thatch, a sound that could cover 1,000 secrets or betray just one. At Smithfield, under a nervous sky, Tyler meets the boy king. A parley, the promise. Then the flash of a blade. The mayor of London, a man whose wealth you helped create, cuts Wat Tyler down. The rebellion's heart is ripped out. The great wave of hope breaks and scatters. You are captured days later, hiding in a Southwark cellar. The smell of sour wine and despair, your only companions. They drag you into the light. A soldier's rough hands pat you down, and he finds it. The medallion. This is the secret that changes everything. The Dark Ages weren't an accident of history. They were an act of organized vandalism. The burning of the Library of Alexandria wasn't a singular tragedy. It was a dress rehearsal for 1,000 smaller, quieter fires all across Europe. This isn't just about destroying heresy. It's about destroying the record. It is the medieval equivalent of a corrupt government, wiping its servers clean before an investigation, deleting any file that proves they are not who they claim to be. They did not want a populace that looked to the stars for answers. But you saw the baker's wife at the market, the way a stray piece of hair fell across her cheek, and for a breath, a single stolen heartbeat. You imagined it was your hand, not the wind, that brushed it away. There was no crime, but there was a thought. And in this world, a thought is a debt. The priest calls it a thought tithe, a penance paid not for what your hands have done, but for where your mind has wandered. They aren't disproving the information. They are poisoning the well, making the very act of drinking from it, of asking questions, seem dangerous and socially toxic. They make the messenger seem corrupt, so you never dare to read the message. The emotional cost for you, a woman in a German convent, is the same as for a dissenter today. Total erasure from the community you depend on for survival. You finish the final curve of the serpent's tail, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. You look at the symbol, this forbidden union of wisdom and access. They had stone, song, and the power of a shared secret laugh. You can almost hear it echoing from the cathedral walls. A faint, defiant sound bouncing between the saints and the gargoyles. And that is the secret that changes everything we thought we knew. The iron belt in the monastery basement, the one we discovered, the one that made our blood run cold, it wasn't a tool of the church. It wasn't a device of oppression they used. It was a prop, a piece of captured evidence from this secret war of wits. A spoken thought, now a social execution. You feel a cold sweat on your own neck. The metallic taste of fear floods your mouth. This is the ancestor of a nightmare you don't even know you're destined to have. 700 years from now, people will carry a black mirror in their hands, a direct portal to this very market square. They will feel this exact same terror, the fear of a faceless, nameless crowd turning on them for a single misspoken word, the dread of being publicly shamed, digitally cast out, their life's work erased by an anonymous accusation. It's a contradiction that breaks the logic of their entire world. The Watchers are hiding something from themselves. And as you rise from your knees, the scratching sound silent once more, you understand a new, deeper fear. The information they collect is not just to control you, it is to prepare for something. And the key to it is locked in their basement. You trace its surface with your thumb, feeling the raised edges of a serpent's scales and the sharp points of a key's teeth pressing into your skin. This isn't the serpent of Eden from the church windows, the symbol of temptation and evil. This is the serpent of knowledge, of the earth, of wisdom they don't want you to have. And this is the key to unlock the prison they built in your mind. This is what you are truly fighting for, the right to think for yourself. But the world turns on moments of betrayal. And as they watch, the ghost wakes up. Faint lines, invisible to the naked eye, begin to glow from beneath the Latin Psalms. It is not the word of God that appears. It is a map, an exquisitely detailed astronomical chart, accurately plotting the heliocentric orbits of the planets. It predates Copernicus by 200 years. It is proof. 99% of people believe the church fought a war against paganism and heresy. But that was just the public story. The real war was against evidence. You are here to pay a tax, but not for your grain or your livestock. You are here to pay for a thought. 99% of people believe the church was only in the business of souls. What they don't want you to know is that they were pioneers in a far more lucrative market, your mind. You replay the moment, the sin. It wasn't an act. You never touched her. To be found with this drawing is to be accused of unnatural curiosity. It's a sickness of the soul, they would say. They would isolate you, shame you, break you not with iron, but with words, with glances, with prayers that sound like curses. Annihilation. This is the same tactic of power that echoes today. When a powerful corporation or government wants to silence a truth teller, they don't attack the facts, they attack the person. They label the whistleblower a traitor. They call the investigative journalist a conspiracy theorist. It's a clumsy device, easily picked by a clever lover, a source of endless humiliation for the jealous old husband who tries to use it. You rob the symbol of its terror by making it absurd. You make people laugh at it, and you can't fear what you laugh at. This is the medieval ancestor of the political cartoon, the genetic blueprint of the internet meme. It's the exact same principle, using ridicule to neutralize an oppressive idea, to show that the emperor has no clothes. The serpent and key didn't have printing presses or social media. But you see the truth they don't want you to recognize. This is social death, performed live. No one meets her eyes. To look at her is to become associated with her sin. To offer a kind word is to risk your own account. Her reputation, once a valuable currency that could buy her credit with the baker and goodwill from the reeve, is now worth less than nothing. The church is the bank, and they have just declared her bankrupt. Her crime? Questioning why the tithe collector's son was exempt from militia duty. Their entire empire, this global web of information and control, is built on one principle: the immediate suppression of any intellectual or spiritual threat. They are the guardians of orthodoxy, the fire brigade for the fires of heresy. Their system is designed to identify and extinguish dangerous ideas before they can spread. So why, in the cold, damp dark beneath the chapel floor, are they hiding the most dangerous idea of all? If their purpose is to destroy such things, to erase them from history, why are they not only preserving this heretical object, but protecting it? It's the same tactic they will use centuries from now, branding men who march for freedom as communists, or those who demand justice as terrorists. The playbook is ancient. When you cannot defeat the idea, you must demonize the person holding it. In a quiet moment, another leader, a priest named John Ball, who is freed from the archbishop's prison, presses something into your hand. It's heavy and cool against your sweaty palm. You listen to the wet sound of rotting thatch dripping from a nearby hovel as you open your fist. It's a bronze medallion. Once the page is a smear of faint shadows, you write a new story on top. A hymn, a prayer, a list of saints, something safe, something they approve of. The secret is now sleeping, buried under a blanket of piety. For 800 years, the secret slept. The book you helped hide sits in the Abbey's library, known only as a common prayer book. It is unremarkable. It is safe. Until now. In our time, scientists place this very book under a new kind of light, a technological sorcery that sees through ink and through time. The most profitable lie in history wasn't about land or gold. It was about what happened inside your own skull. You kneel. The cold stone of the chapel floor bites through the thin wool of your trousers, a familiar, punishing ache that travels from your knees to your teeth. The air is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 whispered confessions, the cloying scent of beeswax, stale incense, and human anxiety. Your knuckles are white where you grip the splintered wood of the pew in front of you. What they didn't want you to know is that this was a code. The serpent was an ancient symbol for wisdom, for knowledge that shed its skin and renewed itself. The key wasn't for a dungeon. It was for a library. A mind. Your mind. The chastity belt was the psychological weapon they forged to make this symbol, this beautiful, dangerous thought, seem perverse. They fused the idea of female curiosity with sexual deviancy, making the pursuit of knowledge an act of shame. The metallic taste of fear is in your mouth. And then there is the society's greatest piece of counter-propaganda, the chastity belt. The church and the nobility want you to believe this is a real and terrifying tool of control, a symbol of their absolute ownership over women. They want the fear of it to do the work. So what does the society do? They co-opt it. They turn it into the punchline of 1,000 bawdy jokes and tavern stories. In the secret literature passed from hand to hand, the forbidden poems and satirical plays, the chastity belt is a ridiculous failure. Her name is Agneta, and last week she was your neighbor. She shared her bread when your fire went out. Today she is a lesson. Her feet are bare on the cold, sucking mud. Her dress has been replaced with a coarse sackcloth tunic, the kind that scrapes the skin raw with every step. Her hair, once neatly braided, is a tangled mess, deliberately filled with gray ash that puffs into the air like dying breath. This is the ritual. This is the algorithm of shame. 99% of people believe this is about God's justice. It's a piece of viral propaganda, a horror story designed and deployed by the network to enforce a specific behavior through fear. They are modifying you. Suddenly, their power makes a terrifying kind of sense. The invisible hand that guides your village, that crushes rebellions before they begin, is the hand of a scribe, noting your every whispered sin. You are not a soul in God's flock. You are a name in a ledger, a collection of vulnerabilities to be managed. And this is what makes the object in their cellar so impossibly confusing. He speaks of mind keepers, the men in black robes who tell you God ordained your servitude, the men with ink-stained fingers who write laws in a language you can't read, binding you to land you'll never own. He says they have built a prison in your soul and told you it was a cathedral. This is a war against them. It's a terrifying, exhilarating idea. At night, you see the pattern of their control everywhere. You see it in the way the powerful slander your movement. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. What they don't want you to know is that the most valuable books in the Middle Ages were the ones with ghosts inside them. They called them palimpsests. Imagine taking a priceless document, a work of philosophy or science from the ancient world, and meticulously, painstakingly, scraping the ink from the animal skin with a curved knife. You listen to the shh, shh of the blade, the sound of a world being erased, one letter at a time. The metallic tang of fear is in your mouth, because to be caught with the original text is death. The air that spills out is stale, smelling of ancient leather and decay. Inside, something is wrapped in oilcloth. But as you reach for it, you hear it. The soft, deliberate crunch of a boot on the gravel just outside the cell door. And you realize, with a cold dread that sinks to the bottom of your soul, that some secrets are still being guarded. The ink bleeds onto the vellum, a whisper made visible. It's not a demon. It's not a monster from the hellmouths carved into the cathedral doors. It is a serpent. But it's not the serpent of Eden, the tempter. This one is coiled, elegant, and in its mouth, it holds a key. You hear the scrape of your own quill against the stiff page, a sound like a mouse scratching behind a wall, a secret sound in the crushing silence of God's house. For centuries, historians looked at doodles like this and saw blasphemy or simple boredom. They were wrong. You hear it in the taverns at night. A new folk song about Saint Martin sharing his cloak becomes, with a few clever changes, a coded story about a local grain merchant sharing his hoarded wheat with the starving poor after a visit from the serpent. You see it in the puppet shows for the children, where the dragon, slain by the night, looks suspiciously like the local lord who just seized 3 farms for unpaid taxes. The stories change, the symbols are subverted, and the very air begins to taste of defiance. The stories they tell you are about iron locks and keys, about chastity belts bolted onto wives. It's a lie. A ghost story told to distract you from the real invention, the one that never rusted, the one you can't see. The true prison was never made of metal. It was made of whispers. You feel it now, standing in the market square. The air, thick with the smell of damp wool and pig manure, has gone unnaturally still. A space is clearing. A path of silence parting the crowd like a foul miracle. Here she comes. It's a terrifyingly modern feeling, The same creeping dread you might feel scrolling through a social media feed that knows what you want to buy before you do. The monastery offers a free service, salvation, in exchange for your most private information. They use this data to build a profile, to predict dissent, and to deploy psychological countermeasures. That story your priest told you about the chastity belt, the one that made all the women in the village clutch their children closer, it's not a historical fact. This is the secret. 99% of people never learn about the peasants' revolt. It was never just about the poll tax. That was merely the spark. The fire was about memory, about a promise of worth that was being stolen back. The official story is a riot. The truth is a counter-revolution. A man named Wat Tyler moves through the crowd. He's not a knight. He's a man who fixes roofs. His voice isn't loud, but it cuts through the roar because it speaks a truth you feel in your bones. He doesn't speak of shillings. You are committing a crime that could see you flayed alive. On the heavy vellum before you, you are tracing not the life of a saint, but the life of the stars. Circles within circles, a dance of planets around a sun that has no right to be at the center of God's universe. This is a secret you are copying from another, older book, a book that will be burned before the sun rises. Yours will be hidden. You pray it is enough. We see its phantom limbs reaching through the centuries, a secret history written in the margins. But finding their symbol is like finding a key without knowing which door it opens. We know the price they paid, but we still don't know what they were trying to build. What was the ultimate truth they were willing to die to protect? Your fingers press deeper into the stone, tracing the cold, unforgiving lines of the key. There's a faint click. A shudder runs through the wall, and the stone block bearing the symbol grinds inward, revealing a small, dark hollow. But 99% of people, then and now, don't understand that this was never a widespread reality. It was propaganda. It was a ghost story told not to keep a woman's body pure, but to poison the very idea of her having a secret, a thought, a key to a lock of her own. Your own secret is far more dangerous than adultery. In the margins of your psalter, where you are supposed to be illuminating the Word of God with pious vines and saints, your hand moves with a life of its own. While the priests preach of hellfire below, you carve caricatures of them above, turning their own house of power into a gallery of their corruption. Each grotesque face is a silent accusation, a defiant chuckle frozen in stone for centuries. The townspeople may not consciously know who they're looking at, but a seed of disrespect is planted. The bishop becomes a little less divine, a little more monstrous. His power, built on awe and fear, springs a tiny, imperceptible leak. This is how the serpent and key fights. It doesn't raise armies, it rewrites the culture. Now, you know the truth they died for. But how do you fight a system that controls belief itself? It is the most powerful weapon in the world, more potent than any army, because it allows them to control people before they even know they are being controlled. This is a secret that historians have only begun to unravel. They can see the vast wealth, the political influence that seems to spring from nowhere. They couldn't explain how these humble monks could hold kings in their thrall. The answer wasn't divine favor. It was data. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the Dant stone. You remember the great sickness 30 years ago, the way it scoured the world clean, leaving fields fallow and villages silent. You remember how, for a brief, shining moment, your life had value. With half the kingdom dead, a man's labor was a precious coin. Lords had to beg for it, pay for it. You tasted the edge of freedom. And that is a taste they are now desperately trying to beat from your mouth with new laws and new taxes. The greatest lie they ever told you was that they burned books to save your soul. The truth, the one that whispers from the ashes of 1,000 pyres, is that they burned them to imprison your mind. You are in a stone room in the heart of Germany at the Abbey of Fulda. It is so cold your breath plumes in the candlelight, a fleeting ghost against the dark. The only sound is the wet drip of water somewhere down the corridor and the frantic scratching of your quill. You are not writing a prayer. For the men and women of the Serpent and Key, the price of this intellectual freedom was absolute. It was the sudden, heart-stopping silence in a room when the Inquisitor's men kick in the door. It was the sharp, metallic taste of fear that floods your mouth when they find the book hidden beneath the floorboards. It is the sound that echoes in this very cell, the desperate, rhythmic scraping of fingernails against wet stone. A prisoner trying to claw their way back to the light, leaving behind only blood and dust. This network was real. The chastity belt was never about sex. The secret it was designed to protect was something the church feared far more than lust: a curious mind. You are in a stone-walled scriptorium in the heart of Saxony. The year is 1322. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying smell of incense, desperately trying to mask something else. The faint, sour odor of damp wool and unwashed bodies. The scent of fear. Your knuckles are white as you grip the quill. Outside this room, they whisper stories of iron belts with cruel locks, a horror story for husbands away at war. They won't see that the twisted, bloated face of this particular demon has the same heavy jowls and the same greedy, squinting eyes as Bishop Renaud. They won't notice that the creature's claws are clutching a bag of coins, a perfect replica of the new tithe bag the bishop parades through the market. It's a secret, shouted from the very rooftops of the church itself. You and the other Masons in the network, you are the hidden artists of rebellion. You don't need a prince to grant you worth. You don't need a priest to find your own soul. You look down at the fragile letter, the ink faded almost to ghosting. The truth is finally in your hands, a single piece of paper that could burn the world down. Outside, you hear the distant clang of the city watch, their halberds scraping against the cobblestones. They have armies, dungeons, and the absolute power to name God's will. This secret society had an idea, but an idea is not a sword. An idea cannot stop a crossbow bolt. Every monastery is a node in a vast network. Every traveling friar is an agent. They aren't just listening for heresy. They are listening for everything. They know which farmer's crop is failing, which merchant's daughter is pregnant, which knight is in debt to a moneylender, which wife despises her husband. They know your weaknesses, your desires, your breaking point. This information, gathered under the sacred seal of confession, is sent by courier to central abbeys, where it is compiled, cross-referenced, and analyzed. You grip the handle of a rusty billhook, its weight unfamiliar, your knuckles white. This isn't a weapon for killing men. It's for clearing brush. But today, the brush is a forest of lords and clerks and priests who have grown fat on the land your sweat has watered for a lifetime. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. But you are not stupid. You have a memory. It proves that for every prayer on the monks' lips, there may have been a blasphemy in their hearts. The girdle wasn't confiscated, it was used. The question is, by whom and for what God? It was a declaration that knowledge was a human right, not a divine gift to be rationed by the powerful. The entire narrative of their blasphemy was a beautifully constructed lie. It's no different from how modern intelligence agencies create disinformation campaigns to discredit and disrupt groups that threaten the status quo. You paint your enemy as monstrous. You twist their ideals into something ugly and perverse. And you give the public a reason to cheer for their destruction. You make them fear the other, so they never have to question your own authority. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. But up here, you are close to God, and you are committing a terrible, beautiful sin. The high-pitched scree of your chisel against the stone block is a prayer and a profanity, all at once. Your knuckles are raw, your fingers numb, but your mind is on fire. You are carving a gargoyle. But 99% of the people who will ever look up at this cathedral will see only a monster. They will miss the joke entirely. This was the truth that the nobles and the high clergy had to bury under the bodies of the Cathars and the ashes of 1,000 pyres. An empowered, thinking populace is the one thing totalitarian systems cannot survive. It's the very same reason authoritarian regimes today shut down the internet, outlaw art, and imprison intellectuals. The most dangerous enemy has never been a foreign army. It has always been a population that realizes it can think for itself. The ultimate secret wasn't a demon. It was the simple, world-shattering idea that you don't need a gatekeeper to find God. What they don't want you to know is that the monastery on the hill is not a house of prayer. It is a data center. The Cistercian and Cluniac orders, presented to the world as pious rivals in devotion, are in fact the competing intelligence agencies of the medieval world. 99% of people believe the scriptorium is for the glory of God, a holy factory producing copies of the Gospels. They are wrong. Its primary purpose is transcribing the whispers from 1,000 confessionals just like this one, compiling a database of humanity's secrets. The royal chronicles claim they found implements of diabolism on the rebel leaders after the execution. What they don't want you to know is that they lied, not about finding something, but about what it truly meant. The air in London is a cocktail of smoke and rage. It's the summer of 1381, and you are part of a flood of humanity that has broken the banks of deference. The stench of the burned Savoy Palace, the Duke's London residence, still clings to the back of your throat, a sharp, acrid perfume of justice. The sound of the iron links scraping together echoes in your mind, an ASMR-quality recording of dread. It is the sound of absolute control, or absolute faith, and you can't tell which is more frightening. This is the truth they never teach you. History is not a collection of facts, but a war of narratives. And the winners don't just write the books, they bury the evidence that contradicts them. This single object, hidden in a wall, rewrites everything we think we know about faith, control, and the secret wars fought in the silence of holy places. An invisible college connecting the midwife in a French village, the glassblower in Venice, the astronomer in Toledo. A secret society of minds who used symbols like this one, the serpent of wisdom, the key of access, to share the things you were never meant to see. Banned texts on anatomy, smuggled from the Muslim world, revealing the intricate clockwork of the human body. Star charts that defied the Church's Earth-centric universe. Forgotten Roman techniques for engineering and agriculture. This wasn't about worshiping a different god. It was about believing in the human mind. In this world, they invented a phantom menace, an iron womb, and let the whispers do the work of 1,000 inquisitors. Your skin crawls when you realize the chilling efficiency of it. A cage that required no blacksmith, a punishment that needed no executioner. This wasn't a useless invention. It was the most ruthlessly efficient system of social control ever conceived. The official histories are a distraction. They buried this secret because it's a playbook. And by the end of this journey, you won't just recognize its medieval origins. You'll see its chains wrapped around our world right now. The most dangerous weapon in this secret war isn't a blade. It's a joke so sharp it can cut a king's authority to ribbons. A joke so infectious it can topple a bishop from his throne of fear. This is the secret the Serpent and Key Society understood better than anyone. They knew you can't fight an army of dogma with swords. You fight it with laughter. The air high on the scaffolding is thin and cold. It smells of damp limestone and the coming rain. Below you, the town is a smudge of wood smoke and human grime. It is not something a pope can grant you or a king can sell you. The key, the letter says, is human reason. The sacred, God-given ability to doubt, to inquire, to ask why. This was the secret of the Serpent and Key. They weren't just preserving forgotten knowledge from Greece and Rome. They were forging something new, something that could shatter the medieval world. They believed that by using the key of your own mind, you could unlock the serpent of wisdom within yourself, freeing you from the prison of an imposed reality. Your voice is a thread of sound in the heavy silence, offered up in exchange for grace. And then you hear it. It is almost nothing, a faint, dry, rhythmic shush-shush scratch, a sound that does not belong here. It is not the rustle of robes or the turning of a page in a prayer book. It is the sound of a quill nib, sharpened to a razor point, dancing across a sheet of vellum. Your blood runs cold. The words you are giving to God are being taken down by a man. And that war had nothing to do with saving your soul. It was about controlling your mind. In this scenario, the girdle isn't a tool of control forced upon an unwilling woman. It's a ritual object, a key. Gnostic beliefs were about transcending the flesh, seeing the body as a prison for the soul. Perhaps this iron cage wasn't to prevent a physical act, but to induce a spiritual one, to create so much pain, so much focus on the prison of the body, that the spirit could finally break free and see the truth. The serpent key wasn't to lock a woman's virtue, but to unlock a man's soul. They were accused of despising the material world, of denying the flesh, of renouncing the church's golden altars and silken robes. And for that, they were erased. Their story was sanitized, twisted into a grotesque caricature to justify a massacre. But this is the secret they don't want you to know. The heresy was a smokescreen. What if the Cathar's belief system was simply the vessel, the hardened shell, designed to protect something infinitely more precious and far more dangerous? What if they were just one highly visible branch of a vast underground railroad of knowledge. This was created to combat a silent heresy that wasn't about challenging God, but about unlocking human potential, a threat far greater to the established powers than any army. To fight it, they didn't need soldiers, they needed a ghost story. A terrifying symbol of what happens when you dare to think, desire, or question. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in the morning fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. The section near the end, titled De Propaganda Contraria, on counter-propaganda, changes everything. The manual wasn't just a tool for projecting power. It was a defense. It was written to combat a weakness in the system, to fight something that was spreading among the common people. A form of knowledge or belief so dangerous to their control, so infectious, that it required this monstrous machine of psychological warfare to suppress it. The manual designed to enslave the mind was created because something, somewhere, was setting them free. And the book does not say what it is. You look at the symbol you've been chasing, from the walls of Montsegur to the banners of peasant revolts, the serpent and the key. And now you understand. The church told you the serpent was the tempter in the garden, the incarnation of evil. But the letter reveals the forbidden truth. The serpent is the sacred, ancient symbol for wisdom. Not a demon from hell, but the divine spark of knowledge coiled inside every human soul, waiting to be awakened. And the key? It's not a relic. The words you whisper in the dark of the confessional are not for God. They are for the archive. You kneel, the rough-hewn wood pressing into your knees. The air is thick with the smell of beeswax, cold stone, and the faint, sour scent of fear from the penitent who knelt here before you. Through the carved lattice, you can see only the silhouette of the priest, a shadow cloaked in holiness. You confess a moment of doubt, a flash of anger at the tax collector, a small, bitter seed of resentment against the lord of the manor. Every whispered confession was data entered into a secret ledger of human desire. The public repression wasn't a fact. It was a desperate, failing strategy. And here is the secret that changes everything. The church knew it was a losing battle. The war on your body, on your most human impulses, was too loud, too public, too performative. It was a grand distraction. Because this public war on sex was designed to keep your eyes away from the real war they were fighting. A much quieter, more secret conflict, waged not in the pulpit, but in the shadows. So, one possibility is that this device was a piece of intelligence, a tool for research, for study. To defeat the enemy, you must first understand their methods, their symbols, their view of the flesh. You must hold their darkness in your hands to know its weight. But there is another, far more terrifying possibility. What if the monastery wasn't just studying the enemy? What if it was the enemy? What if a cell of this forbidden belief thrived here, in secret, right under God's nose? A serpent in the garden of the Lord. A place where hundreds chose to walk into flames rather than renounce their God. That's the official story, anyway. The one etched into the grand narrative of history. But as you kneel in the damp, you run your fingers over a different story, etched into the stone of a crumbling cell. The serpent, coiled around the stem of a key. The air here is still thick with the memory of fear. You can almost smell the sweat of the condemned, the cloying incense of the priests who promised salvation in exchange for surrender. They were called heretics, these Cathars. devil worshippers. The idea of it was the weapon, a piece of psychological warfare so effective, its blueprint is still used to control you today. Deep within the suppressed archives of a Cluniac monastery, a 13th century manuscript, catalogued as De Anima Custodia, on the soul's guarding, waits in the cold. It doesn't describe a metal device. It details a chillingly precise method for building a prison of the mind, a way to make people police their own thoughts, to chain their own souls. The metallic tang of fear in your own mouth, they discovered, was more binding than any iron lock. The belt becomes a cage you wear inside your own head. This is the sick, sinking feeling, the slow dawning horror. This wasn't an accident of history. This wasn't a slow, organic evolution of faith and tradition. It was a plan, a cold, deliberate conspiracy to control thought itself, documented in a secret book hidden in the heart of the Vatican. It confirms every dark suspicion, every whisper of a power that was more than just spiritual. But as you reach the final, brittle pages, a new feeling eclipses the dread: shock. It's not a treasure map. It's not a lost gospel. It's a letter, written in a cipher that has taken you months to break. And as the words resolve themselves under the flickering light, the truth unfolds, and it is more terrifying and beautiful than any demon or angel. What 99% of people will never learn is that the ultimate heresy wasn't devil worship or a secret bloodline. It was a philosophy. This letter is its heart. They teach that faith is a fortress, it reads. We say a faith that cannot be questioned is a prison. Why is it here? Was it a failed prototype? A physical experiment to see if the soul's prison could be made manifest? Or is it something else? You remember the story the abbot told, his voice a low whisper in the dark. That it wasn't a device of control, but a lure. That it was taken from the corpse of a woman burned for witchcraft, who claimed it didn't keep a man out, but invited something else in. But the priests know better. They are the keepers of the penitentials, the church's own secret, internal documents. They aren't books of theology. They are exhaustive, almost scientific manuals on sin. In their obsessive crusade to control you, they accidentally created the most detailed record of medieval sexual life that exists. They list acts you've never even dreamed of. Perversions so specific, they must have come from real confessions. They knew about the bathhouses. They knew about the affairs. They knew about the lovers' trysts in the haylofts and the bawdy songs sung under the breath. They were taking notes. This wasn't a trophy proudly displayed. It was a secret shamefully buried. The lead-lined box wasn't to preserve a relic. It was to contain a poison, to stop its influence from seeping through the stones. This shatters the neat, Sunday school version of monastic life. We imagine quiet monks copying Bibles, tending gardens, their world a simple binary of good and evil. The historical fact that shatters this assumption is that monasteries were often the front lines in an ideological war. They were the CIA listening posts of the medieval world, tasked with understanding and defeating heresy. The serpent and the key. 99% of people who see this symbol think it's a footnote from a forgotten heresy, a dead end in the labyrinth of the past. They are wrong. For a chosen few, it was a password, a promise, a map to a world hidden in plain sight. You are standing in the skeletal remains of a fortress, a place picked clean by fire and righteousness. The wind howls through the arrow slits, a lonely sound that carries the ghosts of screams. This was Montsegur, a Cathar stronghold. The greatest weapon of the Middle Ages was never forged. It killed no one, yet it conquered millions without ever being built. History books tell you a lie, 99% of them. They paint a world of simple, God-fearing peasants, ruled by the brute force of iron and stone. It's a deliberate lie, a smokescreen crafted to hide a terrifying secret about the nature of control. They want you to believe the chastity belt was a 19th century fantasy, a useless invention. They are wrong. The physical object is irrelevant.